I was born in LA, which is another border. Uh, but I spent my early youth in Nogales, and I have a lot of family in Nogales, in Arizona, and some from Sonora. And so the idea of living in this a community which has, very a strong multiple ethnicities is one which I've been surrounded with all of my life. In doing artwork, I like to make artwork around things I'm familiar with. I thought, the idea of finding something exotic, you know, um, and it's never appealed to me. I mean, I know this region. I know the people in this region. I know where the Mexican tapes are my neighbors. It's something I know. I lived there for a year and a half before I ever picked up a video camera. I mean, I knew where I was, and so to me, the act of making art is an extension of my life and my living circumstances. It's not something outside of it. And the same way with the public art projects. I mean, the public art projects that I've done in collaboration with other people are all here. I mean, I've done other public art projects in other places, but a lot of them deal with where I actually am. So in many ways, the idea of what I make artwork around is something, I think that something in my observation doesn't mate with the way that it's perceived. And so I often make an artwork, both for me to understand it better, but also for other people to have some grasp of it. So it's not about, conquering, it's not about exploring the unknown in some other place. It's about exploring the unknown where I am. In, I think it was 93, David Avalos and Elizabeth Cisco and I did a project called Art Rebate, Art de Reembolso. And that project involved taking money, which in part was federal money, and giving back that federal money to undocumented workers, with the idea that these workers paid taxes, and whether it be buying something at the grocery store or through federal income taxes or even through Social Security, and they didn't have a benefit of it. They didn't get it back, and so we thought that in a symbolic way that we would give them $10, and also in another way, it created an imaginary network of these $10 bills, which were turned into artworks mainly by just signing them. And then they circulated around so that when they moved around the community, you could imagine that actually these people were connected to the community, certainly in an economic sort of way. So like when we were on a radio talk show, and Pat Buchanan was talking to us, we could say, well, maybe you should look in your wallet, or Randy Cunningham, go look in your wallet. Maybe you have one of these $10 bills, which is a kind of very interesting kind of intimacy that you're carrying along something that's illegal in your own wallet because you're part of the same economic system. So we gave away, we rebated these people this money in a symbolic way, and the idea was to raise the issue of these people as part of the system, as taxpayers. Back in ancient time in 1988, David Avalos, Liz Cisco, and I bought half the city of San Diego's advertising space on the back of city buses. And on that, we made a billboard that said, a poster board that said, "Welcome to America's finest tourist plantation." And this was the month of the Super Bowl. And the idea was to acknowledge the fact that the Super Bowl could come to San Diego because of the undocumented workforce. It allowed meals to be cheap in restaurants because of dishwashing and service, and it allowed hotels to have cheap service because of the people that did the laundry, because of the people that cleaned the rooms. And so we wanted to make sure that it was clear that San Diego was a Super Bowl site because of these people's presence, even though it was clearly, nobody wanted to talk about it. It was like it didn't happen. We don't have these people here, in spite of the fact that it's true. So we bought it, and of course, then it makes the front page of the newspaper, and then there's a discussion around it, and then the visitors know that in fact they're there because of the work of the undocumented, and which would have been totally swept under the rug if the PR people for San Diego had their way. So that was the point of that. and the piece is really about that dialogue with the community, about about that discourse, and it's a performance piece, and those pieces actually, that's the character that has a meaning, and the people that read the letter to the editor, that watch the TV, the writing the letters to the editor and responding to the project. I mean, that becomes the character of the project. Well, the Nightscope series, which is our photographs, are taken from videotape of a monitor that the Border Patrol uses. And of course, that Border Patrol monitor they use is the version in those shots was Vietnam. They made that technology so they would be able to see hot bodies in the jungles. And so this is the same, it's the same, rationale of being able to see warm bodies in a landscape. And so that's what it's used for. And to me, what was interesting about the photographs is that you could take a picture which was very, very minimal, very little information, and still get the sense of tension in the bodies. You could still get the sense of sort of fear in them, and the idea of the people being mobile and moving through the landscape. And for me, it was you were doing these very gestural kinds of portraits of people passing into the United States. And so that to me was made it interesting. Now, it also commented on the technology, which is about using technology, whether it be laser guided missiles or drone aircraft or whatever else. But it's this idea of using technology as a kind of extension of war, except we have a war on our border, and seen as a war zone rather than a relationship between neighbors, who are supposedly friendly neighbors. That's using war technology to, in fact, work on our border. I've never seen myself as an activist. In other words, I don't have, I mean, if you look at ACT UP and other kind of, political organizations, they're doing artwork and they have a particular agenda, and they're using the artwork as a mechanism to get to a particular end. And I never see, and to me, that is the role of art as an activist tool. But to me, the aim has never been to have this specific end result as much as to raise the issue, which I would think is critically important and been smothered in one way or another, up to a level in which it becomes part of a discussion, to give it a pedestal. And so the issues as an artist are one of taking something and making it evident, to make it shine the spotlight on it, to get it in the newspaper, so it becomes part of a discussion. And so that to me is something that's something that art can do, and that's the way that I've approached art in terms of doing political work. The Montalvo project has 4 elements. There is the gallery installation, which deals with the theatricality of security and immigration. There's an exhibition which is adjacent to that in the billiard room, which has a screening of the Mexican tapes and the American tapes, which has some characters of an installation. And then downtown, there'll be a viewing of the tapes, the same tapes, in a restaurant situation that will be embedded in the middle of San Jose. And then you'll have a forum, which has not been entirely shaped, but will deal with immigrant families from San Jose that will bring up some of the topics that the tapes do in terms of immigration as a process which takes place over several generations, and what it means to be an immigrant, not at a particular moment in time, but how it's evolved over a period of time in their consciousness. And what's interesting about Montalvo and the spaces downtown is that they are, very wonderful exaggerations of the breadth of, demographics and culture. And so being able to bring those two together makes it apparent, the kind of differences that exist within U.S. culture. To me, it brings the two together, because the lives that people were living in the Mexican tapes is more like the downtown life. And those are the people, and the people in the forum are going to be more like the kind of lives of the people in the immigrant tape. And yet, by having some of it in Montalvo and some of it downtown, you have a mechanism for collapsing these two, and which provokes a discussion. And also, when you tie together Montalvo and all of its majesty to a very funky and interesting, but ordinary grocery store downtown, I think it makes that kind of interdependence between the two realms evident.